Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an episode of Whiskey and Wires. I am your well-fed host, John Bingham, and I'm here today with a very exciting guest, studio guitar player extraordinaire, and all things USA for two notes.
Exactly.
Justin Bryant. Holy
Wow.
hell.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Here we are again.
I know.
What's going on? Tell the people out there a little bit about yourself. Ready, go.
Did I get the job?
You did.
Oh, good.
You're in. All right.
Can I counter that offer?
No, definitely not. The job that he's referring to is getting my channel from being 100% male viewership to 50% female. And he definitely meets the qualifications. He's got the job.
I'm so embarrassed.
Ladies, look at this guy. Ready? Go. All right.
Oh.
It's getting weird over here. You know, the problem is I have whiskey and I haven't drank it yet. Look at my little whiskey cup. I've got a little...
Oh.
Isn't that adorable?
Here's my whiskey cup.
A little Woodford?
Yeah, I drank the rest of the cup before we got here. No, actually, I'm a really slow whiskey drinker. I shouldn't admit that. So this has been around a while. Well, here, cheers.
This is a Four Roses bourbon today. I've gone away from scotch today. Usually it'll be a scotch, but today I'm doing a bourbon.
See, I'm from Indiana, so we typically mix this with Coke, and we're considered classy. That's sarcasm.
At the old... Oh, right out of the bottle. You sure you're not from Kentucky?
You know, there's a joke about Indiana. It's just people from Kentucky that didn't get to Michigan.
That's funny. Did you know I'm from Michigan originally?
Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about Friedman and Marty.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Marty's awesome. Everybody knows Marty. Motor City Guitar is an institution. If you're in Detroit, you have to go to Motor City Guitar. Hopefully they're opening back up soon.
Yeah, I think at least probably curbside and all that stuff that they're doing right now, and definitely online. You know, it's wild. I talk to all of these retailers and things still, because even though we're not, really active right now because of the restrictions, you have to keep talking to people or else they're going to forget about you, so you do what you got to do. I talk to these people all the time, and I am hearing that everybody is selling like crazy online right now.
Yes, they are. I was out, so I started the job in January, and within 2 months, I'd been from, obviously, the NAMM show, like all of us, right? So I went from L.A., Chicago, Detroit, Marty, Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, and then from there, I went over to the East Coast of New York, and this is when everything started getting shut down.
Yeah.
And I was not sure if I was going to get out of New York or not, and I did, and literally, I came back, everything shut down, and then, the phones went silent for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
And then everybody that had an online presence appeared.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting, and I won't go backwards or belabor this too much, but we have a warehouse in North Dakota, and obviously companies like Sweetwater are up north in Fort Wayne, which I'm about an hour and a half from. So I needed to have something a little more central to me as far as a facility. So we put one in Whitestown, Indiana, which is just west of Indianapolis. So I had 2 warehousing facilities. I was really nervous that one or both would get shut down. Ironically, neither one did. So as long as I was able to get stock in, and online retailers were able to receive, it's been absolutely crazy. So the last month, unprecedented is an overused word, but for us right now it is. So it's absolutely crazy. And we've got new product coming out next week that people have been waiting for 5 months. And, I'm getting calls on the phone, like people want to double the order, and it's good times, fun times.
It's like a gear renaissance happening right now.
Did you see the Rolling Stone interview or a clip that went out last week? The gear renaissance. And I know that you guys are having issues with the whole production thing, but you guys will be opening next week and get back on track more or less, right?
Yeah, we've got actually we're doing okay, because even though we couldn't build in our facility, we've got so many people that can build. You know, like Dave Friedman wasn't not working. So amps are being built. They were just being built at home. And so we've got a big pile of stuff that's going to be going out. So we're good.
I'm very excited for the Soldanos, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, they're awesome.
Very, very excited. I'll tell you a story, maybe if it's appropriate, of how I had a Soldano die a horrible death.
Oh no!
And how I've never really gotten over it. It's traumatic.
Which model did you have?
I had an SLO 100, and just to make this story simple, when I was traveling a lot and playing in like a college regional band that played like 7 or 8 different states, we were in Lansing, Michigan, and that's Michigan State, right? God, people get so mad at
MSU.
that. So yeah, we're playing at a club right by MSU, and I'm playing. And then my amp stops working. And it's a packed college club. And this is probably 15 years ago now. But my amp stops working. And of course, you know, you like look at your pedal board, you know, which back in the day, it's 3 pedals. And I'm going, okay, maybe something came unplugged. You just start going down this automatic flow chart in your head. Well, I look over at the amp and it's not lit up at all. And in fact, it's not only not lit up, there's liquid coming out of the bottom of the amp.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And there's a girl standing on the stage and a little skirt, and she just looks at me and goes. But magically, the drink that she had spilled inside of it somehow landed back on its top. Meaning, she dropped the drink inside of the amp, and then very quickly just tried to put the cup upside down. It blew every single tube up in that amp.
Sure.
And then, you know, we were on the road, so the next night was Fort Wayne, Indiana. They have a Guitar Center there, a smaller one. They had 2 6L6 tubes. I couldn't get a quartet. They had 2.
That sounds
right.
right.
So the story gets a little worse. So I tried to clean it out as much as I could. I got some deoxit and some rubbing alcohol and whatever I could, you know, put together and clean the amp out the best that I could. And then I ended up having just the bare chassis, and I took it to this club and didn't put it back in the head shell yet. And I broke one of the guide pins off, one of those 2 6L6s, and blew the amp up again.
God, yeah.
So it's 2 nights, and SLOs are bulletproof if you don't pour a drink inside of it. It was my favorite amp, and I went on this tone chasing thing in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I tried every single variation of every Marshall, every Boogie. I mean, whatever was around, I had tried everything, every rack mount, everything. And that SLO, I got it, and it was just. That was the amp. And I never needed to search again.
No kidding.
And I've never been right since. Well, I've never been right anyway, but... Huh? So, full circle, I'm glad that you guys are building them again.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and they sound amazing, and there's a couple of things that were fixed. I know we're not talking about that right now, but just so you know, and so everybody listening in the middle of this story now knows, the effects loop has been improved. Mike had previously put the effects loop in a very weird spot in the EQ, basically. Mm-hmm. So the loop wasn't just sitting, right before the power amp. It was actually like in the middle of the EQ somewhere. I don't know the details. You'd have to talk to one of the engineers. But they've improved that, so now it handles pedals, rack units, and everything, and it's super transparent, and it's great. And they also... went and applied DC heaters to the preamp tubes, which previously it was AC. And the difference with that, if you want to get really nerdy, is that DC heaters are much, much quieter. And AC heaters on the preamp tubes requires you to have incredible patience with selecting your preamp tubes. Because you're basically going through them one by one, plugging it in and saying that one's noisy, that one's noisy, that one's not. And you have a lot more wiggle room when you're using DC. So those 2 things were improved. The amps are still made incredibly well, incredibly high-end, and they're just ridiculously fun to play. But we're not here to talk about Soldano. I got to ask, before 2 Notes, you were a studio musician. And you've got a crap load of guitars, and you've probably got a crap load of other gear, I'm imagining. What kind of stuff were you playing? What was your genre or your field or whatever?
So what's interesting about that was Indianapolis was a really hot jingle, like TV film. And actually, I'm not supposed to say this, and I won't say where, but there actually is a studio not too far from me that actually does a lot of Disney orchestra type stuff. And Disney does not let anybody know who it is, what movies they're doing, because, you know, it's like Star Wars stuff, right? You don't know anything. They actually do some of that very close to me. So that's kind of the last of that work, but I was always very into, you know, I wanted to be a musician as a career. And, you know, I think I remember being about 14 or 15 and hair metal was really big. And there were the guys that looked good and they got the girls. And then there were the guys that were the good players. And it seemed like you could be one or the other. And I think that I was like, yeah, I like girls a lot. But I wanted to be a really good player. So I got really into guys like Steve Morse and wanted to play all different types of styles. That led into country players like Brent Mason, which not a lot of people knew of back then outside of Nashville.
Right,
but
he's huge now.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen Brent play probably 20 times. I've never seen the guy make a mistake. I don't know that he does. He'll tell you he does, but I've never seen one. But, you know, you go down the line to the LA guys and just the Mike Landows to the Steve Lukethers and the Tim Pierces. You know, I was just nerding out of all those guys. I'm doing it right now, by the way. But, you know, you start getting the back catalogs of people. So I was really into what made a studio guitar player. And back in, you know, that time, you had to be able to read. So I became a pretty decent reader. And that's one of those things where you got to be careful. I was good enough to get like hired for all the gigs that weren't that cool.
It's important to let people know, because I know the audience that I cater to, he's talking about reading music, not just reading.
Yeah. So read the little ant-looking dot things.
Right. Many of you still need to learn how to read.
You know, what's funny is I'm glad that I got hooked up with a great teacher, a guy named Sandy Williams, who teaches at IU and several other places. He's played on thousands of records locally, but he sent me some Tommy Tedesco books when I was in like my late teens, early 20s.
Very cool.
And I adopted the Tommy Tedesco way of sort of BSing your way through it. Like if you're not sure how something sounds, let them kind of go through once and, you know, oh, then you can find your place. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's people that are just wizard readers. I was a pretty good interpreter. So, but yeah, definitely a great skill to learn. But anyway, I thought that's what you had to know to be a studio player. I didn't know a lot of it was about time and tuning and feel. You know, those are all the things that you learn later. You think that everything's going to be written out for you. And I probably had 4 or 5 sessions that there were a lot of notes. Everything else is chords and, you know, people talking through things. Sometimes no charts at all. And in fact, a lot of times, you know, no charts. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. And so today you are, like we said before, doing the 2 notes thing. Are you still doing session work at all?
You know, I actually have one coming up at the end of the month, and it'll probably be a couple-hour session. You know, people always say, do you want us to send you the music beforehand? And believe it or not, I typically don't want to hear anything before I do it, unless it's something that's going to be really complex. This isn't anything I'm worried about as far as complexity. Sometimes you just like to go into things not cold, but without a preconceived thing of what you'll play on it. Sometimes, you know, your muscle memory take over, but I tend not to want to hear things or look at pictures of people, because then I'll get too close. It's like, and by the way, it's so, technology is amazing. And of course, this is where we are with, you know, the products we make. You know, everybody can do remote sessions, and it's a huge thing right now, right? I will tell you, there is nothing like getting great players together in a room, talking through a song, ideating it out, and just doing it.
Sure. I
mean, great players will do it in 1 or 2 takes, and usually the first one's the best one. I missed that part, you know, just getting together.
Yeah, I can imagine. The what about the band thing? You do you do that?
I do. So, you know, this is a big gig year for everybody, right? So I've done 1, and we're in May. So, and the cool thing, and I won't digress on this, but the gig that I played was with an R&B band. So we played things like Stevie Wonder, and we played Toto, and we played Steely Dan, you know, really cool stuff that you never get to play, that nobody, you know, really cares that you nailed the solo to Rosanna, right? But as a guitar guy, you're like, yeah, I want to do more of those. So over the years, I don't know, a couple hundred different bands probably.
Wow.
I think people assume, and I taught guitar lessons for 15 years, I think people assume that I know every song ever written. I'm just pretty good at kind of just faking it and picking it up. Sure. But, you know, to me, it's all about doing something different. I don't know that I say no very well, and I also learned that's how you get gigs. Oh, I don't play that style very well, so no. I learned to say yes, and then if I suck, then they just don't call me back.
That's fair. There's a bit of a snowball effect thing that happens with learning songs too. It's like when you play in a cover band, the more songs that you're learning, it becomes considerably easier to learn the next song and the next song.
Yeah, and most pop songs, there's a formula to them. You know, you look at Nashville, and Nashville's very formulaic with songs. And in fact, it's like if you look at a Nashville numbers chart, one song can look identical to the next song, can look identical to the next song. And you got to tip your hat to like Tom Bukovac and all those guys out there that do that, like how they can make the same 4 chords sound different at all. Because after a while, I'm going, what do you do? But, you know, and again, these guys can play anything, right? And the writers can write anything, but it's what the audience wants to hear. So, but to your point, there's definitely formulaic things in all songs. And to be honest, there's only so many different ways chords can go, you know, as far as most of the time. So. Sure.
You've got a giant pile of guitars behind you.
I do.
I see a few things that I'm interested in. There's a blue Gretsch hanging on your wall, I believe.
Yeah.
That is a Gretsch, right?
It is.
Okay. What is that puppy?
That's just one of the old, or not one of the old, it's one of the reissue. It's a, what is the model called? It is a G, gosh, I'm getting my eyes are, G5420T. So it's like a 6120-ish type guitar, but, oh, it's a prop. It's a prop. I play it all the time.
Those are cool guitars. That's so that's cool. And then you've got an Yngwie Strat down there. I'll see that from a mile away anytime.
It's funny how the early 70s, and by the way, the first Yngwie Strat that I bought when I was a teenager had the 50s style neck, and I was in Sonic Blue because the color they listed was vintage white. And I'm like, I don't want a white guitar. I want that yellow one that he has. How come they don't have a yellow one? I didn't know that was vintage white.
Oh, I'd probably get rid of one of my kids, quite frankly, to get one of the Sonic Blue Yngwie Strats.
You know, they're actually going way up in value.
I know. Well, I know. You know, the funny story, I've told this before, but I'm going to tell you this now because it's a ridiculous story. I think it was right around the time that I was listening to Odyssey a lot. Do you remember the album cover for Odyssey?
It was Yngwie, like just his face.
Right, but he was holding a
But he had the Sonic Blue Strat.
It wasn't though. It just looks like
the filters make it look like that.
The filters, it had all those soft blues, and then the guitar looked like it too. But if you really look at it, you'll realize it's the white guitar that he's always holding, but it looks Sonic Blue. So the irony was, when I was listening to that record a lot, I was like, I really want a Sonic Blue Strat. I want something like that, even though I was wrong. And it's funny because that stuck with me today, all the way till today, even though I know it wasn't the guitar. In my head, I need that guitar. So anyway.
So this goes back to what we were talking about previously. 1988 had the Fender catalog. They used the Sonic Blue Strat as the prototypical Yngwie Strat. They made them in candy apple red, vintage white, and the Sonic Blue. I thought Odyssey, the first Yngwie tape I had, was Sonic Blue. So like you just educated me. I thought that was the one to get. And as we were discussing before, from the age of 13 to 18, that was the one guitar I wanted. Biggest Yngwie freak you could imagine. As we were talking before, I learned to play really fast and get in no bands. But anyway, I graduated high school, saved my detasseling corn money and my fast food restaurant money, and started working in a music store and pooled that together with my graduation money and bought an Yngwie Strat sight unseen, because in Indianapolis, you just didn't see stuff like that. So I knew I wanted a Sonic Blue one with a maple fretboard, right? Yeah. The one that was on Odyssey that wasn't on Odyssey, right? Anyway, got the guitar, and high gain grunge was really exploding at the time. So Fenders were coming back and Gibsons and stuff, but I remember plugging in the guitar and the pickups were super low output.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before everybody was really using overdrive boxes to boost things. 88 preamps at the Mesa Boogie tracks. This was a high-end piece, so things didn't have tons of gain in them overall. And those pickups were so low output.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, this doesn't sound like Yngwie. I had no idea he was using a DOD, the 250 box or whatever, because nobody talked about that stuff. I just knew it had no output. The pickups were super dull and out of phase. They were noisy. So, and then the scallop fretboard is something you either love or you'll absolutely hate. And I think most people don't really like it. And I didn't at the time. I hated it. And I'm just going back saying, for 5 years, I lusted after that guitar. I looked at those pictures thousands of times. I got the guitar, and I'm like,
well.
But I got another one anyway. And this is more of, I think, just, we're perpetual 13-year-olds, right? So
Yeah, there's something to that for sure. Well, that's awesome. And that's the one that's got the Furies in it, the Seymour Duncans.
the Furies, yes. The Furies are definitely a little hotter, and they have a lot more mid-range in them.
Yeah.
And they're all stacked instead of two stacked. And I think the YJMs, the DiMarzio YJMs, which were like staggered piece HS3s, because originally it was 2 hum, 1 single. Now it's all 3 are a hum. So, but it's a 3-way switch though. It's not a 5-way switch like the old ones. Anyway.
So we fast forward to today. You've got yourself a new Yngwie Strat, and you've got yourself this gig with Two Notes kind of being the face in North America. Two Notes I've known about for years. A buddy of mine bought a Torpedo, or maybe it's not a Torpedo, maybe it was the VB101, 5-6 years ago. So it was a long time ago. I got turned on to it. Today, I have a Torpedo Live that I use for home recording stuff. You guys have really kind of turned recording on its head. It's a really significant advancement.
Yeah, the game is different now, right? When you started playing guitar, I started playing guitar. And this is a story I tell everybody, and everybody was there. Like 20 years ago, you were playing a coffee shop with a Marshall half stack. You were playing every club with a half stack.
I still want to do that.
Do it right now. But yeah, because that's the iconic look. And, I don't remember very many people telling me to turn down that often, but maybe I'd put the cabinet side stage or something. But I always run amps, 4, 5, loud, 50 watt, 100 watt heads. And it was just kind of accepted. Nobody really, cared too much about it. And now it's funny, you can have like a 5 watt amp and it's too loud. So this solved a fundamental change or shift, I guess, into everything. And, I don't know any clubs where I see anybody really cranking a half stack anymore. I think they're more there for looks a lot of times. And by the way, the few times that you do get to see, a band playing arena rock or something where they're getting to do it, it's an amazing experience. But, it's so few and far between now. So definitely you got to have some way. And the thing about tube amplifiers, you're talking about 60 plus, 70, 80-year-old technology now. There's just something inherent magic about a tube amplifier, just the dynamics and touch response that, you can't replicate. And they're still selling. You guys sell tons of them,
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've been hearing for 30 years that, tube amplifiers, or 40 years that tube amplifiers are going away, but they haven't gone away.
I don't think they will. Not in my lifetime. I hear all the time people say, tubes just aren't any good anymore. And I talk to guys like Steve Bryant, and they're like, what are you talking about? There's plenty of tubes. We do fine with it, So I think that it's not going to go away. And in fact, I would even go and argue that as long as people are claiming to be modeling it, or claiming that they've finally caught up to it, or whatever their claim is, as long as those claims are out there, they're continuing to push the desire for tubes to be alive.
I agree.
Because they're setting the tube up as like, this is the benchmark. We're trying to hit it. So why wouldn't people just chase the benchmark?
Well, what's amazing about modeling and things like that is people are replicating, not innovating a lot, right? They're trying to take old things and replicate them digitally. And to a certain extent, we do that too. I guess my point of that is the game is just changing as far as, if you're at home or you're playing a gig or something, volume sensitivity is a real thing. But back to the part about tube amplifiers, they're not going away. And by the way, I'm going to take a step back. Everybody that says, I just bought the newest whatever multi-box that has every amplifier in the world in it. And by the way, I remember the first time I ever heard a BE100 was in a Fractal several years ago.
Sure.
I guarantee you that Fractal box sold a ton of real BE100s because people were like, oh, I wonder what the real thing sounds like. So,
Sure.
I think to your point, yeah, the modelers actually help sell the other ones. And I always tell people that they're not a replacement. They're not a replacement. So
I can tell you absolutely, I bought my first vintage DM2 because of the DM2 model that was in the Line 6 Helix. I'd never owned a Real Boss DM2 until I started playing that, and I kept playing that model of delay, and I was like, God, I really like that. What is that based on? I do a Google search. Oh, Vintage Boss DM2. I got to get one of those.
You're going to die. I had a DM2 that I paid $20 for probably in 1996. And I go, this sounds like a really crappy delay pedal. Because, it was analog. So, you'd hit the thing and then the repeat would come up like this. Like this. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like a delay that I want.
It's the best. I love it.
Well, and that goes back to talking about the studio guys, right? And when I started playing the very high-end, pristine, the Eventide sound, the H3000, the Lexicons, and, the 2290s to their delays, that was the benchmark. And that it's very digital. And it's making a comeback, but it was very brilliant, very in your face. So a DM2 in comparison is extremely lo-fi.
Sure. So we came from guys like Phil Collin and I'm sure a multitude of other people. Phil Collins on my head right now, using the Palmer PDI-03s and the PG-4s. So now we're I want to talk a little bit about this lineage, because Two Notes has gone from, this is a speaker simulator with a load box, to kind of carrying the flag and really popularizing the impulse response thing. Now, I don't know that you guys were the first ones to do it, but you've definitely carried the flag and popularized it.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So analog loads have been around a long time, and I think Eddie Van Halen, late 70s, early 80s, with like Jose Arnando, they kind of popularized that whole thing of taking, the output section of an amplifier post-transformer and sucking, it down into line voltage. And it was for Ed for a couple of reasons, right? So he could run multiple amplifiers off kind of his main Marshall, right? But it was also a way to convert things to line level. But that's a very fixed, type of thing. It's not the most reactive, right, kind of experience, but it works. The Palmers, I think, got fueled by guys like Ed, and you still see people like Joe Bonamassa using them now, and Def Leppard obviously using them for years. They have kind of an immediacy to their sound,
sure,
but there's I don't want to say an artificial thing to them, but there's only so far you can go with analog circuits as far as the complexity of how a loudspeaker works and all the intrinsic things of the roll off of certain frequencies and the spikes of other frequencies. Analog filtering you can get okay with, but you can't replicate an analog speaker with analog filtering. It's just glorified EQ. You can get somewhat in the ballpark, but you can't get all the way.
No, it's 100% right. It's basically like a filter on an analog device is basically like a fixed graphic EQ, where some engineer said this is the best sounding EQ curve to simulate this speaker, and then they fix it.
So here's something kind of ironic. We go back 20 years ago, and I don't know if I was the first, but we were talking about studio stuff. I think I may have been one of the first guys in Indianapolis to have a pod. And for me, it was a game changer. I have a 2.0 version back behind me over there, and I've done some interesting tests. So not digressing, but tying into where you're going with this. Yeah. Believe it or not, the old pods don't sound that bad. The modeling was actually pretty decent even back, 20 plus years ago or so. DSP was fairly limited, so there's definitely an inherent latency to those. Mm-hmm. But the speaker was kind of the weak part of that, right? But back then, there was really not a lot to compare it to. But to your point of how technology's changed, I can take that pod old 2.0, I can plug it through one of our cab M boxes, load up XYZ, cab or any kind of third-party IR to it, and it sounds right. Now, there's latency in it, right, that I can't get rid of, but it's a game changer. And there's several videos on YouTube of people taking different pods and doing that. But I guess my point is the speaker sound, that final filter, shapes the sound way more than people would ever imagine. And I remember being a kid and you just wanted Celestion speakers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a little older than you, so, greenbacks were what the older speakers had. They had G1275s was kind of the stock speaker. Nobody thought about speaker cabinet sounding different. Nobody thought about speakers sounding different as long as you had Celestion. So people would think, a plywood cab with Celestions sounded just as good as any other cabinet with whatever, right?
Sure.
And we know that that's completely not true. And in fact, I'll argue that the speaker cabinet can influence the sound of the speaker more sometimes than the speaker itself can. So, and it's kind of like,
with that.
Well, like the Friedman cabinets are exceptional, and I know that Dave, mixes those up with different, types of speakers. Like people think vintage 30s are inherently honky. Well, there is a bump to them, but in the right cabinet, the right amp, they're exceptional. Absolutely. Yeah, they can be a little nasally if not done right, but that's where the construction of the cabinet really matters too. That's a good example of that.
Different amps work better with different speakers and so on and so forth. The speaker really contributes an enormous influence over the tone. I see these guys on forums talking about, I want to change my tubes from 6L6s to KT77s. What do I need to do to get it done? It's going to make this big difference. It's like, dude, that difference that you're going to get out of that is going to be minute, and it's going to be a feel difference to you more than it's going to be an audible difference to your listener, whoever that is. Whereas your speaker cabinet is night and day, obvious.
So I used to have a Pine 70s Marshall cabinet with greenbacks in it, and back, gosh, I keep saying 20 years ago, but over 20-ish years ago, I used to go buy basements, like silver-face basements, for dirt cheap.
Yeah.
You take an old Baseman head, like a blackface or a silverface Baseman, late 60s to early 70s, and you plug it through a Marshall greenback cabinet, and you put some volume on that. Yeah, the tone stacks are a little different from a Marshall. I'm telling you, man, it sounds like a Marshall. It's that sound. When you start pushing those speakers like that, it's amazing how, going back to your part, I got to change the tubes, I got to change this. Those are minute differences. That speaker is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. And so Two Notes comes along and has a box that, like I said, my buddy had, where you've got all these different speakers inside of it. And this is the first time I ever had that experience. I knew that, like, you could get IRs and stuff like that, but I never messed with the software. So we're at his studio one day, and we're going through this Torpedo VB101. And forgive me if that's not a Torpedo.
No, it is. It's the flagship, early flagship. You're correct.
Okay. So we're going through this product, and we've got his amps plugged in, and you're just listening to studio monitors because it's dead quiet otherwise in the room, and it's like, oh, how does the thing sound through a greenback? How does it sound through a creamback? How does it sound through this? And you're just dialing through it, and it's like, nah, that one sucks. That one sucks. Oh my God, that one's amazing. Let's keep going. And you're like hearing all these crazy differences, and this was something that was almost groundbreaking for somebody like me who loves to do like home recording. Like, I've always had decent home recording equipment, and I think I'm decent at mixing stuff and so on, but I'd never had such a luxury.
It's a game changer. I actually have an ISO room closet that's been retrofitted as an ISO booth, and I've got a ribbon mic in there. I've got a 57. They're perfectly phased align. I've got them going through Neve clone preamps, and this is the reality. I really don't use them anymore, and I haven't for a long time. Is there a difference? It's arguable. I mean, obviously I have a bias, right? But I'm telling you, it's definitely arguable. And just the capture process of what we do and how people capturing IRs, if you do it right, it's consistent 100% of the time. And once that sound's there, if you're doing a session or you're playing a live gig, I think the big appeal for live is a couple things. It's the stage volume issues rectified, But for front of house, it's consistent every night.
Right.
You know, you don't have to worry about microphones or the room or something changing, right? It's there every single time. And plus you get the variety too on top of it.
If you are in a hard rock band and you like to utilize feedback, like I'm a big fan of like controlled feedback. I think when you work that into a song the right way, it's amazing. So there's definitely still room on your stage for a cabinet, because you kind of need that in order to pull that stuff off and to pull it off accurately. But that with like a device like you guys make, whether you're talking about a Torpedo Live or like a Captor, you're just basically feeding the front of house with that device, and you can also still continue on to a speaker cabinet. So it's not like an either or. It's you can have both.
So exactly, there's a couple different ways to look at that. Is the first thing is the front of house people want that consistent sound every night, right? You want to be able to feel it, right, if possible. Honestly, most bigger acts, it doesn't matter if it's metal like Slipknot or you know, Brad Paisley. You'd be surprised how little stage volume some of those people really use. So to answer your question or your statement about feedback, yeah, sometimes if you have the luxury, you want to still feel it, right? Because that's why we all started playing loud, right? We want to feel that sound. But if you've noticed things like the Digitech, is it the Freak Out, the one that'll do the feedback? I've got one. But you push the pedal down. Yeah, I think it's the Freak Out. But also, when you're talking about Def Leppard, they've been silent stage for decades, right?
That's true.
What does Phil Collins have in that neck pickup? What does Steve Vai have in his neck pickup? What did Eddie Van Halen use a lot in his neck pickup? The sustainer.
The sustainers. And they're just hitting that. There's like a harmonic switch on that sustainer, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
So that's another way to do that. And by the way, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. If you have the luxury to be able to get that controlled feedback, you know, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
And here's a little trivia for you. The sustainer was originally called the Sustainiac, and it was developed in Indianapolis. Weird random truths of Indianapolis.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it originally clipped onto your headstock, but yeah.
At some point in time, Fernandez got a hold of it.
Yeah, Fernando's distribution was in Indianapolis in the late 80s, early 90s, and that's kind of where that dovetailed into.
Got it. That's a line that somehow or another never really broke into America. Considering worldwide, it's kind of like an Ibanez. But you don't see it a lot in America.
Absolutely. The people, when I was a kid, that carried Fernandez is because you couldn't be a Fender dealer. Back in the old days, right, 30-plus years ago, the lines were very territorial. It didn't matter if it was PV or Fender or Gibson, you know. They wanted one representation in one area of the city and one in the other side of the city. And, you know, it was a way to kind of control, you know, who had what, right? But Fernandez was always a line that you could get if you couldn't get Fender. And to your point, they're exceptional guitars. I mean, some of them probably are way nicer than a lot of Fenders made at the same time. But it's amazing what brand appeal has, right?
That's it. That's totally it. So going back to your lineup there. Walk me through a little bit of what's current. I know I'm stumbling over my words here. I apologize, folks. The Torpedo Live is still relevant. The VB101 has been replaced at this point.
Yeah, the VB101 was replaced by the Studio, which was an enhanced version of that. Okay. We've actually just recently are discontinuing the Studio. And believe it or not, it's not because of demand. We had a ton of demand this year. We can't get some of the parts. So there's...
I know the story.
There's some future works of that product. Yeah, we just couldn't get the parts for them anymore. We have enough to service them and fix them, and I have a few B stock left. But yeah, and they're killer. They're still the best one. But yeah, you know, technology switches.
So you can do 2 IRs at a time with that box. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you go down to the Torpedo Live. Excuse me, and that's is that 1 IR or 2 at a time?
So
I have it, but I use one. I use one like 100% of the time.
You know, a lot of people do. Here's what I say: find your sound. Right. You know what I mean? And we have two schools of player, right? We have the guys that play, we have the guys that tweak, and we love both of them equally, right? The tweakers We'll scroll through 5,000 different IRs. The players go, I know what I want to hear, and as soon as I get there, I stop.
Yeah.
So I have a live down here that I've had now since 2013, I think, so 7 years.
Wow.
So I got indoctrinated through the company, through meeting some of the older guys at Nashville and meeting Guillaume through that. I did a video for them several years ago for the live. But to your point, yeah, the live was the load box section, but it was one cabinet, one microphone originally, and it was MIDI controllable, and it had a digital, output on there. But it could, at the time, only do one microphone. And then maybe 2 years ago now, you can use two microphones on it. So that's a big change, right? You could put a 57, the 121, you could run a condenser and a dynamic. So that was a big shift. So the live is still really good, but we got something pretty special coming out this week.
Oh,
or
interesting.
this next week.
So before you get to the new thing, walk me through the rest of it. You've got Captor and Captor X. Give me.
That was my secret.
Oh, it is? It's on the website.
No, it's not a secret. No, here's the big thing with the Captor X.
Okay.
We announced them at NAMM. They will be shipping next week. And the demand is huge.
The NAMM acronym of not available, maybe may, holds perfectly true in this case.
That hurts. So let's back that up.
It's not a bad thing. It's actually great because I've worked for many companies where it's like, oh yeah, we'll have them by March or whatever, and then the end of July rolls around and we're like, oh yeah, we'll have them in a couple of weeks. It's like,
what's the other saying? Never April, maybe never. You know what I mean? But it doesn't fit with the NAMM. That was the other saying, right? Like, does anybody even want this thing that I just put a couple lights in and some screws that doesn't even work? Can we build demand? And by the way, my first NAMM show was 27 years ago.
27 years ago.
27 years ago.
Good Lord. You were okay. So you went when you were 18?
I was 19. Good? 19 was my first one.
That's amazing.
Yep.
All right. So get on to Captors. Let's hear it. What do we got?
So we'll break the line down. So the studio's been discontinued because of parts. Hopefully we'll have a new high-end flagship. The product right underneath that a lot of people seem not to forget about, we still do very well with them, is the Reload. The Reload is a 2U box that is probably the best reamping guitar DI out there, and it has a power amp inside of it, so you can take a 100-watt head or 150-watt head, you can convert it to line level, and then you can get that tone at any volume. So you can take a Plexi Marshall, get it at 8 or 9 or where the sweet spot is, and bring that volume back. Right. But it's an exceptional DI and reamping tool. Hundreds of big studios have a Reload in there specifically for reamping, because it's a way that you can get the right input and output every single time. So the Reload still is a very popular product for us, but it's a little bigger. It's a 2U, but it's a heavy-duty piece of machinery, and it can handle a lot of power.
Sure.
So we go to the Reload, and then you mentioned the Live. The Live is...
Well, before you go to Live, I have a quick question. On the Reload, I'm assuming there's a direct out on it where you can line it into your system and then use Wall of Sound to get your IR from there.
Absolutely, and I probably should have mentioned that back. Okay. So a lot of people that use... And by the way, speaking of Wall of Sound, we recently did a promotion where up until May 11th, by the way, for the next few days, we're giving it away for free, and it comes with 7 cabinets free.
Oh wow. So folks, I will put a link in the description of this video because it will be out before the 11th. You should take advantage of that. If you don't have Wall of Sound in your recording rig right now, it does work with Logic, it does work with Cubase, with Pro Tools, pretty much anything. If you've got a reasonable DAW, it's going to work.
Yeah, so we make Mac versions, Windows versions for every single DAW out there. It's a plug-in for your DAW. So you open it up as a plugin inside of your DAW. But you have access to our speaker tabs in there, and we have over 400 of them now. Right. So we have third-party affiliations from companies from Celestion on down, but we have over 400 different speakers and cabinets now with different microphones. So your tone is in there somewhere, and I think people don't remember that. So yes, going back to the Reload, you take your amp, you use that load section, and then you go into the Wall of Sound, and you can run. And by the way, Wall of Sound, something I want to bring up. You can run tons of instances of wall of sound at one time. So you can run stereo, you can run multiple cabinets, multiple microphones at one time. So if you want to run 4 cabinets and 4 different microphones at one time, you can do that.
There you go. Get some blending going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were on to Torpedo Live, I believe.
Yeah, so the Torpedo Live has been around for several years. It's still very popular. We're still debating if we're going to do more of those because we're going to see how the Captor X does in the market with that. They're different, and I'll just address the differences. The Live, which is still a very popular professional like live rack mount load box, it's still incredible. It has digital inputs. It's full MIDI. There's things like that that are still very, very usable and very good. So people think that the Captor X is a full replacement for that. It's just different. So I was trying to choose my words carefully so people don't get confused.
Sure. So tell me about Captor X that's coming out.
Yeah, so actually I have one plugged in, but I'll unplug it real quick.
Okay.
So this is the Captor X.
Oh, it's much smaller.
Yes, it weighs a couple pounds. The awesome thing about this is, you can see my hand, it fits in a gig bag and literally weighs almost nothing.
Right.
So, and I'll go to the back real quick. It's got stereo outs. So that's definitely something different from the Live. It's got a left and a right, wet and a dry, or 2 mono outs. It actually has a 2-step attenuator in there. So it's 38 dB, which is like whisper quiet.
Wow.
It's got a 20 dB switch in there, or you can just unplug the speaker completely and, have full 0 dB. And it actually is full MIDI too. So with the Torpedo software and the MIDI switcher, you can actually assign not only patches, but you can change any continuous controller you'd like. So you can move microphones around, you can, move volumes around, you can turn reverb off and on, you can turn our twin tracker off and on. So this is a stereo unit. We have new reverb algorithms that are truly stereo. Let me go around to the front of this. So I don't know how well this comes through here, but we try to make this really simple. So
I'll blow up your screen so people can see a little better.
So here's the reality of where we are with things. We know a lot of people just want to plug in and go. It's a tweaker's paradise in this little box, but a lot of people just want to plug it in and make it sound good out of the gate. So we spend a lot of time making really good presets. But anyway, you come in here and you've got your output level for your headphones or for your, your DAW or for your live console. And then we've got this really cool voicing switch that is what we call like a vintage to modern. So you can scoop the mids and you can, boost the mids. It changes the feel a little bit. So it's like a quick EQ adjustment.
Sure.
Like, hey, is it fitting in the mix? There's a little too scooped. Okay, I make a slight adjustment. And then we have the space knob, and the space knob has 2 different functions. By itself, it controls the reverb amount. And something that's really exciting about this is we have a stereo headphone jack on here. And John, I'll go back, and a lot of people just want something to plug headphones into.
Of course.
But they want to have a great experience. You plug headphones into this, and this is how we did this at NAMM and different trade shows. You plug headphones into here, and you turn that space knob and use one of our stereo reverb algorithms. It feels like you're right in the room. And you can get it really wet. But it's like that sound, and it's just in your earphones. So it's something I tell people they have to experience it. And by the way, every dealer that I went to, every potential dealer I went to, as soon as I would take whatever amplifier, turn it way up, and put the headphones on people and let them play it, it was like, aha, every single time.
Yeah, you just get it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things you have to experience it, but when you experience it, you go, I got it. And then there's something really cool that we've added in here too. It's called a twin tracker. People are familiar, I think a lot of people, with the TC Mimic. The twin tracker is a little different. What it is basically a doubler, right? But it's an algorithm that we created, and it creates this immersive stereo field. I almost liken it to like Eddie Van Halen using the micro pitch setting of the Eventide, but it's not as drastic. It's not as wet. It's not as, I don't want to say dated, but it doesn't have that feel. It just adds this immersion. But if if you're tracking a guitar, it feels like you've got 2 guitars being, recorded at the same time, but just that little bit of offset in there. That's incredible. Yeah, and there's some videos out there that demonstrate that. We've got more videos coming out, by the way. So, by the way, I encourage anybody to just Google Captor X or look it up on YouTube. We've got several great pro videos coming out, several are already out, but more coming, that demonstrate the twin tracker. And again, it's an experience and a sound. So,
Okay.
and that's definitely unique to us. And then we have some other stuff in there too, like there's a stereo enhancer and some other cool stuff in there. But this was made for three audiences. It was made for the home bedroom player that has an amp. Maybe he or she can't play loud. They have kids or they have neighbors, right? And they want to crank the amp up. That's one audience. We have the second audience is the home recording person. Stereo, mono. Say you want to have a reamp track and an affected track, you can do that with it. And the third one is the live market. So, everybody will be playing gigs again soon, but nothing out there is in this form factor, which is really, really exciting. And the price. I mean, there's nothing out there in the price point either. So yeah, I know I just gave a pitch on it.
No, it's totally acceptable. It's something that's going to be, I mean, it's a great tool. And people come here to learn stuff. Why not learn about something like that? I think it's great.
And again, going back to the simplicity thing, there's 6 presets on the front. We've got everything from the stereo reverb to the twin tracker, all in those presets. We've got 412s to 112s. Some people don't care.
So
However,
that particular unit has 6 IRs built into it.
It's actually got way more than that.
Oh, okay.
But the preset knob is assignable to 6. It's basically like patch 1 through 6 are on that knob.
I understand. Okay. So can you, does it link up to like Wall of Sound or whatever to where you can go into it and you can...
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
All right. You're holding your phone, so I'm assuming...
This is a big differentiator too.
Okay.
So first of all, let's go back to what your point was. Yes, Wall of Sound is amazing. And I want to make sure that anybody that listens to this understands this, because this is a misconception of Wall of Sound. When you put a microphone in front of one of our cabinets in there, that's not a static IR. That microphone and the position that you can move it just with dragging your mouse is up to 20,000 different combinations per microphone front and back. Not one, 20,000. That's an astronomical number. But there's a whole algorithm and process behind that. There's multiple miking techniques that we use. And by the way, with the third parties, we teach them the process and the capture process. Everything is perfectly phased aligned. What we're trying to do is stop people from going down the IR rabbit hole. There are some great IRs out there. And John, you've probably been through this. You open up a folder, there are 6,000 IRs of the same speaker. And let's talk about analysis paralysis. I've done this for dozens of hours. Click on one, sounds okay. Click on the next, sounds better. Click on the next. What the hell did the first one sound like? You'll get so far down that rabbit hole that A, you didn't play any music. B, you've completely lost realism of what even sounds good anymore, because you just, it's like an audio illusion almost.
Oh, entirely.
So yes, it comes with 32 cabinets out of the box, ready to go. So you've got them all there, but you have access to our full library through the Torpedo software that it comes with to download any of our ever-growing library, which is now over 400 cabinets.
Okay.
But the big differentiator is we have an iPhone app or an Android app, depending on which phone you have, and it works with tablets as well, that'll let you control all the different parameters. So if you're at a gig and you want to switch the speaker around, and again, I don't know what people can see from my angle, but like right here, the Captor's loaded up with a 421, 2 of them through like a deluxe style cabinet. And also something really cool we have in here is a smart noise gate. And all you do is you hit the...
But I should just let you know, the screen's not really being picked up. It looks like it's just super bright, but...
Yeah, it's cool. I can send you some screenshots or just talk through it. But
as you're describing it,
yeah,
just so you don't feel like you're having to hold it out there. That's
okay. So anyway, it's got, and I'm so used to looking at it, but anyway, you can click on any preset, you can move the microphones around, you can control the distance, the access, the phase, all those different things. And then you scroll it over with your thumb, you've got access to an EQ, you've got a stereo enhancer, reverb, you can turn the twin tracker on, and every one of those parameters is MIDI assignable if you want.
That's so cool.
But it's not an iOS only, it's not an Android only, it's a either or. So, and most people may never use it. Again, you can use the 6 presets, but dial your sound, click save, it's saved in the box.
So for folks out there who might be asking the question, watching this interview, saying, like, they're talking about all this stuff, it's way over my head, I'd love to be able to record at home, but I don't really know a lot about it. Could you, as a studio guy, and as a guy now doing this, could you give us like a 5-minute walkthrough on how you would put together a good guitar signal path at home for a beginning home recordist?
Oh, there's a couple ways to do that.
Sure. If you were talking to somebody who asked you that question genuinely, unlike me, who I'm asking you that question with all sorts of preconceived notions in my head. But let's say somebody's genuinely curious.
And we forgot about this. So this will be part of the conversation.
We'll go back to that. That's the cab. Is that cab M?
Yes, and we actually have an update coming out called the Cab M Plus.
Ooh.
So some of those features I told you about in the Captor are now going to be in the Cab M Plus.
All
Plus,
right.
a whole new feature set in it that's not in anything.
But wait,
so
there's more.
There's more. Going back to how the signal flow works a little bit, you find the guitar you like, you find the pickups that sound good, the guitar, all those things that we're talking about that are very incremental. You have the pedals that you like or whatever. You have the amplifier that you say, this is the sound that I'm going for. Our whole idea is to take the hybrid of old tech and new tech and converge the two.
Sure.
And I will tell you, John, it's an experience thing. Nothing feels like a tube amplifier. I don't care how good a profile is. I don't care how good amp modeling is. A tube amplifier has a very specific response. And, you work with Dave Friedman and guys like that. They'll tell you the same thing, day in, day out. And of course, that's what they do, but it's true. A tube amp pushed a certain way feels a certain way with a certain guitar. You roll the volume back on a Strat, it's got a certain fight to it, or whatever guitar, they all have their inherent, subtleties and things that make them special. And every amplifier has certain sweet spots in it. So the whole idea of what we do is so you can converge our tech with what you know. So it's like what I said in the video I did for Two Notes several years ago. Don't get rid of your amplifiers. Find new ways to use them. So carrying around an amp head and like a Captor X is a very easy way to do something like that. So that's the first step. And, I don't know how much you move that Marshall cabinet, but I swear they weigh 10 times more than they used to. Now, of course, they weigh the same, but, the world's changed so much that they're not fun to move. And once you carry a Captor X or something light, you don't want to move it either, right? Once you get it dialed in, you're like, I don't want to move that cabinet anymore.
I think the rule is every year that you age beyond like 35, the cabinet weighs 5 more pounds each year.
I think that's completely accurate. I thought it was because they collected more moisture and they got heavier, but I'll be careful how I say this, but I used to work for a really large music company that probably made more 412 cabinets than anybody. And in the prime, they sold thousands and thousands of 412 cabinets a year. The last year I worked for them, we sold maybe a dozen. I mean, it's not that 412s aren't awesome, but it's just a different world, and you kind of have to adjust to it. So I wasn't trying to end run your question, but
no, it's okay.
Yeah. Amplifier, your effects, your guitar, you plug in this box, it's consistent every single night. You get that tone at that volume, and it works with every kind of amplifier out there. That was the whole idea. Yeah. And again, you have to make it simple. So when you're talking about the audiences, right? We know that we have the audience that doesn't know much. Make it easy for them. Plug it in, turn a knob, it's there. For the people that are very particular and they want that speaker with that cabinet and that microphone, the guys that really know that, help them get that as fast as possible. And no offense, some people have IRs they love. We make it so you can load any third-party IR in there. At the same time, we try to make it so you can find that sound visually and quickly.
Sure.
So I hope I answered the question the right way on that, because that's one answer.
Sure. And okay, so step back from Two Notes for a second and just be Justin Bryant, the studio guy. If you were going to walk through you setting up a signal chain into your computer for recording, that's what I'm trying to get to, because some of these guys are going to say, my line out on my Marshall valve state head sounds terrible, and I don't know what to do to make it sound better. Like, and we used not even know what an interface is.
So there's a very world-renowned guitar player that tried an ADA preamp one time, and he didn't run it through a power amplifier. And by the way, back in the late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't uncommon for people to take things like those preamps, run them straight into a console, run them straight into a machine. There's no filter on that, right? It's just full frequency. And so you've got to make sure that the voltage, so things that are coming off a tube amplifier, that's a lot of power that you've got to, and let me tell a very quick story, probably how I've ended up in this job. So we talked about the Ingve Strat, but when I was 14 years old, I detasseled corn for an entire summer, which, by the way, unless you're from the Midwest, you probably don't know what that is. It is probably about the most awful job a little kid can have. You're literally going through cornfields, pulling the tops out of corn for 8 to 10 hours a day. Anyway, that was the only way I could find to make money. The music store I took lessons in had a Laney AOR 100, which had all these cool push-pull knobs and extra gain stages, which all the shred guys had, right? So all the shrapnel guys were playing these modified, Laney amps. There was a used one in the store, so I saved all this money all summer. I took it home. I had a Crate G10 amplifier and this Laney amplifier. I took the line out of that Laney amplifier to the input of my Crate G10, and you know what it did? It did nothing. So you know what I did? I turned the amp up louder. Still nothing. Turn it up louder. And then I start to hear something, which is like the sound coming off the tubes, and then poof.
Fantastic.
I blew the amplifier up.
You had no load on that head.
No load. Of course, I'm 14 years old. It's the 80s. I don't know what an amplifier needs a load, right?
Right.
Tube amplifiers have to have a load, or you will, if you're lucky, you'll blow a fuse. If you're lucky, you'll take out some grid resistors or something. If you're not lucky, you'll blow an output transformer. So tube amplifiers have to have a load on them. I learned it the hard way. So I'd worked my ass off that summer to get that amplifier, and I blew it up in the first 2 or 3 minutes. And it took 2 or 3 months to get that thing fixed. And, and you're a kid, you don't have the money. And just the experience sucked, right?
Yeah.
That was the only time I ever didn't plug a tube amplifier into a cabinet. So I go to the music store, and the guy starts talking about Van Halen and load boxes and talks about load resistors. And, of course, I'm like, do you get that at Radio Shack? You didn't. So this guy at this music store is telling me all this crazy stuff. And it was like, okay. So anyway, I ended up getting a cabinet and a cheap eminent speaker from a music store and was able to get through. But that was an awfully humiliating experience.
Sure.
So back to the part about the Marshall valve state. Luckily, a solid state amplifier, you're not going to probably blow up like that. But tube amplifiers have to have a load. That's coming full circle what we do. So when you're going back to the thing about the studio thing, yeah, guys didn't know that you had to plug these into power amps. They didn't know that those needed to go into speakers all the time. But let's take that a step further. You're talking about studio guitar. The miking of a cabinet, we were talking about how cabinet sounds and how speakers sound different. Mm-hmm. You move a microphone 1/100 of an inch this way or back, the whole sound completely changes. Mm-hmm. You blend in other microphones, the sound completely changes. You start learning about phase issues, like why did my sound just disappear, get really scooped out? There is a definite art to understanding how to mic cabinets up. Not only is there an art to miking cabinets up, there's a cost. Yeah, you can get a 57 and hope you get lucky, but if you want a ribbon microphone and combine it with a nice dynamic mic, you're talking about maybe thousands of dollars.
Sure.
So
what's
and then
Royer 121 these days got to be $1,200.
Yeah, exactly. And the Royers are exceptional mics. There's no question about that, right? And they give that beef in the sound that a 57 isn't going to do. But let's just call it what it is. Who wants to spend $1,200 for a guitar microphone if you don't have the means? Who's going to spend the money on high-end Neve clones or API or whatever type of preamps? There's also a whole art and experience and a science behind miking those things up. The room it's in, there's a million different variables. And I guess where I'm coming is, John, the chances of you getting a crappy guitar tone out of the gate are probably, 100%.
Enormous, yeah.
And Yeah, so that's the type of thing that we help fix, is that problem. And let's go back to what I said. I've got an ISO room with a cabinet in there with a nice ribbon mic and a 57 on it. I don't use it anymore. It's difficult. It's all about simplicity. So I hope I wasn't in running what you're saying, but it's a very difficult process to get that sound you hear on records, or you hear at the concerts. As a beginner, you need something that's easy to do. And unfortunately, it's a lot of long hours and lessons learned to get there. Or like me as a 14-year-old, the robot.
Or me as a 34-year-old, or even now. No. So folks, if you have a desire to start recording your guitar and you want to sound good out of the gate, rather than going out and buying 57s or condenser mics or any type of mics, consider taking a look at like a Captor. The Captor is going to be your cheapest barrier to entry. Is that right?
Yeah. The Captors are extremely popular, and to make this simple, there's a few things they do. So this is a load box.
Which means what you won't blow up your tube amp. Right.
This is what the 14-year-old me did not get, because they didn't make these that A, you could afford, or B, I had a clue where to get. But this works. We've got a couple analog emulators in there, and honestly, the guitar one was a Marshall cabinet with the Vintage 30. It actually sounds really good. You can also flip the phase of it if you want, and it's powered phantom power, through your console or recording preamp, and it takes a variable, comes with it's just easy. And then you can actually pad it down 20 dB. And I don't think most people understand how much 20 dB is in an amplifier, but 20 dB is like going from a jet engine to gig volume, a reasonable volume.
Yeah, it's big time. Yeah, so that's how much does that run these days?
So the Captors right now are $269.
Okay,
and
so you're under $300. That's, I mean, yeah. Okay, so you're under $300. Your amp is safe, and you can take the line out from there into your recording interface.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, you have a signal chain that will sound better than 90% of what you're going to be able to accomplish in your bedroom with a microphone.
And you
Probably
nailed it.
95%.
There's one knob on here, which is the volume knob. I mean, you can't mess this up. So just for simplicity's sake, keep it simple, stupid. It's right there. However, we do have just the line thing, so you can go right into the wall of sound software or any third-party IR, whatever, straight out of there. So yes, the Captors we've sold thousands and thousands of those. They're
absolutely
probably the most affordable, but they are a reactive load. So they do interface with the amplifier, and they do have the right feel. They aren't a fixed resistance. So to your point, without sounding like a sales pitch again, it's easy and it's inexpensive, and it could be the deal saver.
No, it's okay. It's okay to have a sales pitch from the standpoint that this is such a practical thing. People really should be turned on to it. Now, the Captor X, do you guys have a price on that in the U.S. yet?
So you notice they're the same exact size. Yeah, the Captor right now for the first run is $549.
Okay. And the Torpedo Live is still $7 something.
Yeah, it's
$7.99.
$749 to $799.
Okay.
Depending.
Okay.
But and again, the Live does have a few features that the Captor X doesn't, as far as interfacing with some things. So I don't want people to think it's not as cool. It's just different.
Sure, but it sounds like you could take your tube heads into, and again, now you're upping your ante here a little bit, 5.5, and you're getting a significantly improved signal chain. I could tell you right now, if you were chasing the concept of home recording and you wanted to do it right, you can't even buy a decent microphone preamp. Forget your microphone. You can't even buy a decent preamp for anywhere near that. So
if you're recording, if you're recording vocals or drums,
really
so if you're a guitar guy and you don't do vocals and you don't record, drums and things like that, this is a much easier way to get there, much faster, much, cheaper. But I think you save a lot of frustration too.
Sure.
Like I was mentioning earlier, there's nothing like a great set of APIs and great microphones, right? But where does that make sense, right?
It's hard, yeah. I mean, you said yourself you have an ISO room. That's a big start for a lot of guys, especially guys in big cities. Even if you're making a decent living in a big city, you're living in an apartment. You're a renter. It's the way it is.
Yeah, and actually, this room, you can't see it. There's a panel behind me, but I have quite a bit of treatment in this room. It takes a lot of work to make an ISO room, too, to actually make it so it's A, reducing sound, but B, to actually sound correct. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. You're going to spend thousands of dollars regardless.
Sure. So, I have to ask, this is like a complete departure, I'm sorry, but behind you, you've got what looks to be a Fender or a Charvel. I can't tell, but it's copper, and it looks like you've got a humbucker in the neck, or I'm sorry, a single coil in the neck and a humbucker in the bridge. Can you bring that closer to frame?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a story behind that.
Sorry.
And by the way, people may notice this piece over here, one of our competitor pieces. It's a great box. I don't use it anymore, but I was using it to ABR boxes against it, just so when people say, what's that doing back there? I test on everything.
So what in the heck is that?
So I actually played in an 80s tribute band, kind of like a Steel Panther-ish band. I traded an amp, and I got some cash on top, and somebody even put the volume knob that says tone on there. And it's got an old Bill Lawrence pickup and a Duncan 59. But that's an old Floyd, and there's a tremolo on there. But it's set up like Van Halen with a neck pickup, so it's got that 80s shredder thing to it.
Yeah.
The story that I've heard about this is this is a Richie Sambora signature American Fender neck.
Okay.
This was supposedly sent to Richie with a batch of other necks. This is the story. To Japan, and they took a handful of necks and they sent the other ones back. Somehow, according to legend, this is one of the necks that was in that batch. As far as I know, it's an uncirculated, like regular Fender serial number.
Okay.
So this is actually a Sambora neck, so it's like a vintage spec 60s neck, cut for a Floyd, and then there's an OFR on there, original Floyd, and it's like metallic orange or whatever. It was done by a car body place.
Oh, so the paint job was unique. Yeah, it's just really cool to see a hum single on a Strat. I don't think I've ever seen one from Fender, so I had to ask.
Yeah, it's a warm month body, and the single is actually a little 59, so it's really a humbucker. But yeah, I think the thing that reminds me of most is like George Lynch in the 80s.
Oh yeah,
because he would. This has got a three-way switch, but he'd pop, pull the push-pull knob. Wait, oh my gosh, I've had this guitar for 10 years, and I never noticed it had a push-pull knob. I got to figure out what it does.
We're making dreams come true here, folks.
I'm guessing it's a coil tap. I'm not kidding. 10 years of playing that guitar everywhere. I was like, and George Lynch has a push-pull to switch the pickups. Whoa. So do I.
That's hilarious. Oh, man. Justin, if folks wanted to know more about the Two Notes stuff, I mean, we got into some of it here, but it's a deep product line, and there's a lot of really cool stuff. What would be the best way for them to approach that?
Call me on my cell. Wait, okay, don't do that.
Number right there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, put it down there. The first 50 callers will get. No. Anyway, the Two Notes website is 2-notes.com. That's one way to do it. Another way is to go to Facebook and look for our forums, our Two Notes user group. We have two of them. We have a technical group, and then we have just a user community. It's got 40,000-ish people on there, so a lot of those people are very good about giving feedback. Guillaume, the owner in France, Guillaume is on that forum all the time, every day, answering technical questions for people. So the forum is something, if people don't know how something works or want to get involved with that, just click like and join the page. And then the Instagram is a great place too. We'd like to feature our artists on there and users with their their rigs and setups. So that's another way to do it. And then just getting on Google, looking for Two Notes, you're going to pull up a ton of videos. You'll pull up a lot of our retail outlets as well. And then just very simply going to YouTube, typing in Captor, typing in Two Notes, Captor X. Any of the products that we have, or even Two Notes, you'll pull up hundreds of different videos. and
Cool.
some of them are done by exceptional players. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, they show you how to get there fast.
Right on. Do you do session stuff actively? If somebody wanted to reach you and hear some sampling of your guitar wizardry.
So the answer is yes, if I have time. But if I don't, I know lots of exceptional artists that we work with that I'd happily refer you to. So if I can't do it, there may be somebody way better for the job. So happy to help somebody out there too.
There you go. Hey, you mentioned a moment ago the cab, and we kind of glossed over it. I want to get back to that really quickly. So what is that? There's no buttons on the top of it.
There's 2 buttons. 2 load and clear buttons. Yeah.
No, I mean like foot switches.
Yeah. So this is made as a, your amp DI. It's a virtual cabinet just right here. So you can plug your pedals into it. You can actually bypass and go straight to your cabinet. And then it's got an XLR and a direct balanced out on it. So this is made for people that want to not mic their cabinets up and take a direct feed that's got our cabinets and microphones and everything all loaded right in there. Or if you've got just a few pedals that you want to use, you can use this. We were talking about Captor X earlier. We're actually betaing the new version of this, which we're calling the Cab M Plus. Mm-hmm. Same exact hardware. So anybody that owns a Cab M or buys a Cab M, it's going to be a free upgrade. It's a very significant upgrade. We have redone the power modeling. So the KTA, ZL34s, ZL84s, all those have been redone. We've changed some of the functions and improved the power amp capabilities on there. But something significant that we've done, we added a preamp section. So this is a true pedal platform.
Oh, that's cool.
So when people buy the Friedman pedal and they want a compact, easy-to-go solution, or a Rev pedal or whatever they're using, or a Wampler, you can use your pedals. You can use that as your preamp and power amp, like your amplifier in a box. Mm-hmm. It's right there.
That's really cool.
And it's got reverb and some other effects and things like that, but it's super simple to use. So when you were saying there's no foot switches, you control the volume, you control which cabinet. Most people set it one place and then they forget it, and that's kind of the idea of it. Yeah. And you can store presets, but yes. So now it's a true pedal platform. Still can use it with an amplifier, but we're really focusing on that pedal market.
Man, that's cool. Yeah, that's been blowing up. I've been seeing a lot, and there's a lot of really good shit out there right now. I played one of those blue guitar things. You ever play the blue guitar amp one thing?
Yeah, he's how good that
sounded.
He's an incredible guitar player too. Like, he's a good example of a guy that built a product to suit his needs, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, he was the studio guy too. That was, I want to make a better mousetrap. So yeah, it's a great time to be a guitar player. Great time,
for sure. For sure. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's fun.
Thanks, John.